L'honorable député d'Outremont.
Assalamu alaikum. The
terrorist attack that was carried out last night at the Quebec City Islamic Cultural Centre shook our country to its core. Right now, families mourn the loss of their loved ones, and they are praying for those who are injured and who are fighting for their lives. To all our Muslim brothers and sisters, we say that we share your mourning and we pray for you, and we pledge that we will stand united to fight against hate, intolerance, and Islamophobia, and against those who spread policies of fear and division. Today, people do not feel safe in their own places of worship. Many of them do not feel safe in their own community. And that is something that we cannot accept. That is not the Canada that we believe in. And it is not the type of society in which we want to live. Canada is a country of diversity, of peace, and of inclusiveness. We cannot and will not tolerate hate or violence, and we will not do so. Today, our hearts are broken. But we were all horrified by the terrorist attack in Quebec City, and we do not understand. We do not understand this violence, this barbarism. We do not understand that anyone can pull the trigger to kill people who pray, speak, and think differently than themselves. We denounce this, we reject it, and we refuse it, this violence that makes us sad, that makes us angry, that causes us to despair. We do not understand it, and we will not accept it. How can someone do this? It simply doesn't make any sense. This type of thing should not exist. It must stop, Mr. Speaker. We are in desperate need of love, Mr. Speaker, love and solidarity. Yes, we stand with our fellow citizens in the Muslim community. We stand with the families and friends who yesterday lost a loved one for nothing. Our thoughts go out to the children and the spouses of the victims of this senseless and cowardly massacre. Solidarity, Mr. Speaker, solidarity. We stand with all those who mourn today the unjust death of the victims of the Quebec City terrorist attack. We stand with all those who are ashamed of what happened at the Quebec City Islamic Cultural Centre, who are ashamed that such a terrible thing could have happened in our society, ashamed that January 29, 2017 will go down in history as a black day in our society. We stand together in mourning. We stand together with all Quebecers who are affected by this event, all those across the world who feel shocked and devastated by what happened yesterday. And we will also stand in solidarity when it is time to find solutions. This must stop, Mr. Speaker. We mourn Quebecers of Muslim faith because it is time to weep, but it is also time to love and to stand in solidarity. Tomorrow, we will look inward, we will reflect, we will find solutions, and please know that you can count on us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon us, Canadians. C'est un grand honneur de parler parmi mes collègues.
It is a great honor today to speak to my colleagues. I share all the feelings, the sadness of my colleagues the Honourable Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Member for Outremont, all members here today share these sentiments of sadness, and I send my condolences.
Leader of the Bloc said it best, we don't understand. This is Canada. This is Quebec City. This is a mosque where innocents gathered to worship. We know that much, but we can't understand it because it's so out of order. Does it belong in Canada? It feels as if it couldn't possibly have happened, and yet it did. We will pray. We will work. We will reject intolerance and hatred. And we will say, as our Prime Minister has said, to every single Muslim member of the Canadian family, today we are all Muslims. We stand with you, and we will never let there be daylight between a Christian, a Jew, a Sikh, an atheist, and a Muslim in this country. We are Canadians, and we stand together in love. Thank you.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the attack on the Centre Culturel Islamique de Québec. I now invite honourable members to rise.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills, commons, resuming debate at second reading.
And so with that, the business of Parliament resumes. Speaking there, the leaders of the three main parties, a representative of the Bloc Québécois and Elizabeth May from the Green Party, beginning, of course, with the Prime Minister about half an hour ago, carried live on CBC News Network, referring to the million Canadians, referring to the fact that there are 36 million Canadians in total, and that the solidarity all of Canada holds for the million Muslim Canadians. Also referencing there what he referred to as Canadian values of openness, diversity, and in particular freedom of religion. There have, of course, been mass shootings in this country, but none quite like this, and none in which people were gathered together in peace to worship in a place where they felt safe and where they were attacked in the way that the attack has occurred in Quebec City last night. Our CBC's Evan Dyer has been watching along with this. Evan, obviously a number of moving tributes there. Clearly, real emotion coming from the leaders there as they tried to come to grips with this, as people across this country are. What did you take away from listening?
Well, I think it's worth noticing that at least the first four speakers, and I'm sure Elizabeth May would have done the same as well, made a point of using the word terrorist in their remarks. And of course, by anyone's definition, this would meet that test. It is designed to spread terror, clearly, and it targets civilians. So it is a terrorist attack. But I think it's interesting that we have usually not heard that word used for, well, really never in the West have we heard that word used to describe what appears to be, in somebody's mind, some kind of a reprisal for perceived attacks on the West from Muslims. It is indeed increasingly appearing that this attack was about that. I have to say, of course, we have to wait for a clearer word on the true motive, but certainly it does look like the first and most serious, really, attack on Muslims in the West in recent times, going all the way back to 9/11. It's difficult to think of another episode like this anywhere in the West. And so certainly, it's had a big impact on all the leaders, and I think we saw it there on their faces as well as in their words. Two of them referring to peace be upon you, or salam alaikum, the Arabic peace be upon you, the Muslim greeting. We heard that from both Tom Mulcair and also from Elizabeth May. And interestingly, Philippe Couillard, who was, of course, a doctor in Saudi Arabia and who speaks some Arabic, used the same phrase in his news conference earlier. One of the things that I think it's early days to talk about yet, but I think that people are going to look at in the next couple of days is the context in which these events occurred. Of course, what's going on with the visa ban in the United States and the rise of the right wing in Europe, the fact that the National Front is leading in the polls, in some polls in France, and all of this is going to be brought into this, and people are going to look at what people have said in Canadian politics. And I thought we heard just very delicate hints at that already in these first comments from our Canadian political leaders, with Justin Trudeau reminding all MPs that they are leaders in their communities. There seemed to be a very subtle little message there, and with Tom Mulcair referring to those who peddle the politics of fear and division. So I would say look in the coming days for people to get a little bit franker in those kinds of remarks.
Absolutely. The Prime Minister, as I said, referencing Canadian values. And for him, it seemed the benchmark that in the Prime Minister's mind made this a terrorist act was to say people targeted for practicing their religion. And that, for him, was the gateway into classifying this as terrorism. Evan, we want to thank you for listening in and providing your guidance on all this. CBC's
Thanks.
Evan Dyer joining us from Ottawa. You can track the latest updates on the deadly mosque shooting in Quebec online. You can go to our website and check out our live blog for developments in the story throughout the day. And of course, we'll have you covered right here on CBC News Network. We'll be back in a moment. Security is tighter today at mosques across Canada. Here is what national organizations are doing.
We have increased security at all of our mosques. Being one of the largest Muslim communities in Canada, we have members from Newfoundland all the way to British Columbia. We're also in coordination with police authorities to get and have requested extra patrol. And lastly, we're informing members to also be on the lookout.
Zaid Arouani is with Islamic Relief Canada. His organization has worked with the Quebec City Mosque in the past. Islamic Relief Canada is mobilizing support for those affected by the deadly assault, and Zaid Arouani now joins me in studio. Let's take you back to last evening when the news broke of this. What was your reaction?
Well, actually, I was in Edmonton, just preparing to come back to Toronto, and devastating. I was at the mosque a few months ago working with the community. We prayed our evening prayers, and after the congregation, there was a very long, deep discussion led by the leaders of the congregation and the congregation itself, about how the community can increase its support to vulnerable people, to poor communities, both in Canada and globally, Syrian refugees who aren't able to come to Canada. And so it's, a very empathetic community, and people who are interested in the well-being of their neighbours and the people around them. And so it was heartbreaking to hear the news, and I'm really, thoughts and sympathies and prayers over the families who must be going through such a hard time right now.
Let's talk about the act itself. Obviously, 5 times a day, you're called upon to pray. You go to the mosque. Those times are easily accessible online. People would know when to go to target people praying at a mosque. What is that event like for a Muslim, and what would their attitude be when that attack started?
Well, your attention is undivided. You are facing Mecca, and it's a spiritual act. You're in seclusion, even though you're with other people. Your head is bowed down. Typically, the doors, the entry points to the mosques are at the back, so normally people's backs are turned to whoever's coming in, and because they're in prayer, they're in solitude. And so the community, mosques are generally welcoming places, and they're open places, and it's just a big empty hall for people to stand in contemplation. And so, they're quite vulnerable. They're quite vulnerable, and I understand that a lot of mosques and masjids across Canada are really looking at what type of security they have in the mosques.
Is that also a moment where, for a Muslim, that is when they are most at peace? They are at one with their God? Absolutely.
We see the world around us today, and there's so much to think about. Intolerance is becoming so vogue suddenly, and one thing we have to remind all our neighbours is, intolerance doesn't just stop with 6 poor countries who don't have, economic ties with the USA. Once the wildfire of intolerance takes over, suddenly you're not Christian enough, you're not Republican enough, you're not conservative enough, you're done. It's a wildfire, and it really consumes communities and societies. And we'll look back at the charred remains of what was once a beautiful, cohesive community. And so it's that type of contemplation that happens during prayer. You're looking for guidance from God's holy words, and you're looking for guidance inside yourself, and you're thinking about your life and your day and trials and your neighbors and your friends and the poor. So it's a very, you're engrossed. The ritual is one where you're kind of head bowed, and you're going between kneeling and prostration. So it's a very spiritual act, and
Christians would call that a state of grace that you'd be in.
That's a good term.
How are Muslims across Canada processing these events?
With shock. Look, the Muslim community, people, when you say terrorist act, people think, neo-fascists disguised as Muslims doing an act on people who aren't of the Muslim faith. But for us, the terrorism has been, mosques across the globe have been targeted by this same group who the rest of the world fears. And then the rest of the Muslim community is then demonized, and Islamophobia and the rhetoric of hate and the other becomes quite apparent, and quite, everyone's talking in those tones and in that language. And so the Muslim community, as disappointed as we are, everyone's just heartbroken that it happened. When you're targeting a community for so long, for so many years, in such, vicious terms, and so brazenly, I had an altercation with a guy on the plane coming back. He was an American gentleman coming back from the plane. He says, all Muslims are terrorists, and your Quran teaches you to kill everyone. I says, hold on, where are you getting this?
Somebody said that to you on the plane coming here.
On the plane.
All Muslims are terrorists, and...
Well, actually, he said all terrorists are Muslim. Okay. All terrorists are Muslim, and your Quran teaches you how to, you have to kill everyone. I says, here's my Quran. Show me what it says it. Show me what it says it.
I'm going to have to stop you there, but I want to thank you so much for coming in and giving us your perspective on this.
Thank you so much.
Zaid Al-Rani is with the Islamic Relief Canada. CBC News Network continues to bring you live coverage of the latest developments in Quebec City's deadly mosque attack. Let's recap some of what we know so far. 2 men were initially taken into police custody, but investigators now say only one of them is a suspect. The other man is considered a witness. Party leaders in the House of Commons addressed the shooting in today's first parliamentary session since the Christmas holidays. The U.S. president called the Prime Minister to express his condolences. Donald Trump also offered assistance. Justin Trudeau will travel to Quebec City to attend a vigil this evening. Opposition leader Rona Ambrose and NDP leader Tom Mulcair are expected to join him. As we go to break, here's a look at some of the scenes from that attack on the mosque in Quebec City. The Premier is expected to speak again next hour. You can watch that live right here on CBC News Network. We're back in a moment.
To the family members of these innocent victims, to the people of Quebec, and to all Canadians, know that we will get to the bottom of this. Such senseless violence has no place in Canadian society.
The Prime Minister condemns the deadly shooting rampage at a mosque in Quebec City. Trudeau called it an attack on all Canadians. 6 people died and more than 12 are injured after a gunman opened fire during prayers last night. You're watching breaking news coverage on CBC News Network. I'm John Northcott. We'll have the latest on the ground in Quebec. We're also following fresh details on the victims, and we'll hear from a friend of one of those killed. More than 18 hours after the attack, some details are beginning to trickle out. Here's what we do know. Police have 1 suspect in custody. A second man who was detained is being questioned as a witness. We also know all the victims, the 6 dead and 18 wounded, were men shot as they prayed. 5 of the survivors remain in hospital. 2 of them will need ongoing surgery. Police are now stationed outside every mosque throughout the province of Quebec. As well as lowering flags on Parliament Hill and the province's National Assembly, a vigil will take place later today to honour the victims. The Prime Minister will head to Quebec City later to express his support for the community. The attack in Quebec has shaken the province and the entire country, and the Prime Minister and the leaders of the 2 opposition parties are about to leave Ottawa for Quebec City. Justin Trudeau invited the others to join him for the vigil being held there this evening. Last hour, in the House of Commons, he spoke to Canadians and for Canadians to this country's Muslim community.
Canadians will not be broken by this violence. Our sense of spirit and our sense of unity will only strengthen. The people who commit these acts mean to test our resolve and weaken our values. They aim to divide us, to sow discord and plant hatred. We will not close our minds. We will open our hearts. Mr. Speaker, my friends, my fellow Canadians, let us strive to be the best version of ourselves in these dark hours. To the more than 1 million Canadians who profess the Muslim faith, I want to say directly, we are with you. 36 million hearts are breaking with yours. And know that we value you. You enrich our shared country in immeasurable ways. It is your home. Last night's horrible crime against the Muslim community was an act of terror committed against Canada and against all Canadians. We will grieve with you, we will defend you, we will love you, and we will stand with you. Over the coming days, take solace in one another. We will mourn this devastating attack, and we will heal together as one community, as one country, and as one family. Canadians will not be intimidated. We will not meet violence with more violence. We will meet fear and hatred with love and compassion. Always. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. CBC's Evan Dyer has been watching along with us from Ottawa, and he joins us now once again live. Strong comments there from the Prime Minister, evoking the entire country effectively in reaching out to the Muslim community. We also heard from opposition leaders, and what did they have to say?
Yes, in fact, we heard from leaders of all 5 parties represented in the House of Commons. 4 of the 5 used the word terrorist to refer to the attack, which I suppose is not really surprising, given the fact that it was designed to spread terror, and clearly it's an attack on civilians in a place of worship. But it was interesting, nonetheless, to hear that all 4 of them made a point of saying that. Elizabeth May didn't, but no doubt would not dispute that. As we heard the Prime Minister there reminding, it wasn't in that clip, but in his comments, reminding all members of the House of Commons that they were leaders of their communities. I thought that there was the beginning, and very early days yet, but the beginning of some talk of the climate around this, not just the shooter himself, but the climate that is prevailing at the moment, not only in Canada, but around the world, with things like the Trump ban, which we would expect to see discussed in question period shortly, on people from those 7 Muslim-majority countries entering the United States, and the rise of the far right in Europe, and so on. And of course, in our own domestic politics, we have seen some of those same themes, particularly in the leadership race of the Conservative Party. And I think that we're going to see, and have already begun to see, some talk of whether or not that climate might contribute to this kind of violence. And we heard from Tom Mulcair in his comments talk about those who peddle the politics of fear and division. Rona Ambrose from the Conservative side was very clear in her condemnation of these attacks, but also seemed perhaps to be defending some members of her own party when she said that there was no member of this House of any caucus who would wish this on anyone. So people are just perhaps beginning to test the water now around some of the sort of the larger context or climate around these attacks, but I think it's a theme that we can expect to hear more of in the next few days. And I should also mention, John, on one other topic, that Sean Spicer, the spokesman for President Donald Trump, who called Justin Trudeau to express his condolences earlier today, just made some remarks about these shootings too. And in one comment, he said that this is a terrible reminder of why we must remain vigilant and why we must take steps to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to our nation's safety and security, presumably referring there to the visa ban, which no doubt we're going to hear a lot more about shortly in question period.
Evan, thanks so much for this. CBC's
Thanks.
Evan Dyer in Ottawa. The shooting rampage is now the subject of a major police investigation. Hundreds of police officers from 4 forces, led by the RCMP, are involved. Our Catherine Cullen is at the scene of the shooting rampage, and she joins me now with the latest developments. Catherine, thanks for joining us again. The story continues to unfold. We're now learning the name of one of the 6 men who was killed in the mosque.
John, CBC News has confirmed that one of those 6 victims was Azadin Soufiane. He ran a halal grocery store. It's less than a kilometer here from the mosque. In fact, we passed by it as we drove in. He was a father, and a lot of people have pointed to the fact that this is a man who was very active in the community. They've told us about this being someone who helped welcome new people to Canada, helped integrate them to Canada, and all of this, of course, speaks to the message that we heard from some Muslim community leaders here in Quebec this morning, who actually implored the media to talk about the lives of these 6 victims, to make their humanity clear, to help people understand the loss that was caused by what everybody is recognizing today as a tragedy.
Let's talk about the investigation as it moves forward. What's the latest from police, particularly on the arrest? Because as we understand, 2 men initially taken into custody, and of course the search for the motive continues, Catherine.
Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you, we are still seeing a lot of activity here, police vehicles coming back and forth. An individual from the coroner's office who actually just went past the barricade. There has been an update, sort of big picture from the police, in that they have said that of those 2 people who were detained, one is considered an important witness, but the other one is the suspect, whereas we were initially given the impression that they had 2 suspects in this case. But now it seems that they have done some of the interviewing work that they hope to do, and one of those individuals is just considered an important witness. One of our colleagues also spoke to the Quebec City Police, who say they've been in contact with CSIS. They were not aware of any specific threat against this mosque, that the suspect is unknown to police. And people may have heard over the course of the day, John, that there had been a previous incident at this mosque, a pig's head that was left outside. Police are not able to make any connections to that particular incident and the obviously much more extreme event that we saw. Those words don't even come close to beginning to describe it, but the taking of the lives of 6 people, and of course 5 more still in critical condition.
Catherine, thanks for this. CBC's Catherine Cullen in Quebec City.
We're all Quebecers. All of us, each one of us. We have to listen to them and hear them. May peace be with you.
Earlier today, Quebec's Premier offered his blessings to the Muslim community. A series of vigils are planned for today. We'll have the latest on this story throughout the day on CBC News Network. We're back in a moment. This is a live shot, the podium there, the microphones, waiting for the arrival of Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard. Of course, he has spoken several times on this already, but we are expecting another statement at any minute now, and when that happens, we will take you there live.
There should be no fear, ever, of worshiping your God, our God, here in Ontario or in Canada.
An expression of solidarity and sympathy from Ontario's Premier. Kathleen Wynne went to a Toronto mosque today in the wake of that deadly assault in Quebec City. Mosques in Canada are stepping up security following the shooting. 6 people were killed. Another 5 were wounded during the attack at the Islamic Cultural Centre. Karim Alabed is an imam in Quebec City, and he often leads prayers at the Islamic Cultural Centre where the shootings occurred. We understand that one of his friends was killed in the attack. The imam now joins me live. First, let me begin, sir, by offering our condolences for your loss. Can I ask you, what was your reaction when you first heard about the shooting?
Assalamu alaikum. All right, it's I don't find the words. It's very shocking, devastating, and it's just hard to understand what is happening right now.
Can you tell us about your friend?
He is a good person, of course. He was a symbol of presence of Muslim community here in Quebec. He was an merchant, and he was very kind. He proposed his support, his aid of everybody, and he was really a good person. It's very hard to see that he's gone.
Can you tell us a little bit his age, his family, any other details about him?
He was 55. He was married with three children, and he was very implicated in his family life, community life. He frequented the mosque almost all day. Every day he was there, and he symbolized the big integration of Muslim here in Quebec and Canada.
You, I understand, preached at this mosque, at this Islamic Cultural Centre. Can you tell us a bit about what role that the centre played in the community?
First of all, I'm not a preacher in this mosque, in other mosques, yeah, in Quebec, but not in this mosque, especially. The center, Islamic Center, is like a repair of all Muslims in Quebec. He was the first center, Muslim center in Quebec. That's why he's very frequented by all Muslims, and he plays a role like far of all Muslims he's in Quebec.
In trying to understand what has happened to your community, what happened in that mosque, how are you going to explain it to people? How will you explain it to your own family, to your children?
Indeed, it's very hard because we don't longer feel safe, but we still a strong community, a little community, yes, but we still strong, and we represent almost 1 or 2% of Quebec population. We have to find words to explain that is isolated act. It's not really what think all population of Quebec, because we live here from a long time, and we have neighbors, we have family, we have clients, and we live all together in harmony, in tolerance, and that's the message. That's the word we need to give to our community, because they need to be supported, and I need from our Quebecers neighborhoods to support all Muslims, because they need it, because we don't feel safe like any time.
Sir, I want to thank you once again for speaking to us. I want to thank you for helping us to understand what your community is going through. And once again, our condolences for the loss of your friend. Karim Elabed is an imam in Quebec City. Taking you live now as Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard speaks about these events. Have a listen.
So let's think a moment about the victims. Each of one of these victims has a name, a history, a family like so many families in Quebec. In my name and in the name of the entire Quebec population, we extend our deepest condolences. I also want to thank all those men and women who were quick on scene, first responders, police officers, health care workers, and professionals. Let's think about Quebecers of Muslim ancestry. They are our colleagues. We have to repeat this with a great deal of strength. We are all Quebecers. The entire world is watching us. It is the time now to show who we are, to show the best of ourselves. Men, women who live together in French in this particular corner of North America, the province of Quebec. My house is your house, as the poet says. I want to repeat here and now that the cause that is ours, that drives us, is that of an open society, fully confident, a welcoming land, where there is only one level of citizenship that applies to everyone. Everyone, of course, will be speaking these words in days to come. The challenge is going to continue after with strength and total awareness. The words that have been uttered, the words that have been written as well, are not insignificant. It's up to us to frame them, to choose them, to write them. They may unite, heal, or divide and hurt. It's up to us to choose. In upcoming days, we will find more about what we seek to understand. In a few hours, we will be together to reject this violence. Let's all walk together in the name of friendship as well, mutual understanding, brotherhood. Those are the choices that this tragedy should give us. I want you to know, and what I do as Premier of the province of Quebec, your Prime Minister, it is one of confidence and openness. Citizenship is fully and totally shared for everyone, regardless of the color of our skin, our beliefs, or who we happen to love. Dear Quebecers, one and all, that is the Quebec that we've always dreamt of. That is the Quebec that we've chosen. That is the Quebec that together we will be the envy of everyone, our common home. That with which the guests' room will come from all kinds of seasons to build here in the province of Quebec.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Quebecers, I have already addressed you on a few occasions here following terrorist attacks that had taken place overseas. In 2016, we came together to mourn the death of 6 Quebecers that were killed by terrorists as they were participating in a humanitarian project in Africa. But last night it was much closer, so much closer. A tragedy took place in our capital, our beautiful capital, so welcoming and peaceful. And we can see, of course, that this kind of event can happen anywhere. Let us first think of the victims. Each one of them has a name, a story, a family, families like so many others in Quebec. In my name, on behalf of all Quebecers, I again would like to extend my sincere condolences to the loved ones. I also want to thank all of those who came out to show their support. Let us think of Quebecers of Muslim faith, our fellow citizens. Let's say it again, very strongly. We are all Quebecers. The whole world is watching us. Together, it is time to show who we are, to show the best of ourselves. Men and women who live together in French in this piece of North America that is Quebec. As was written by Gilles Vigneault, my home is your home, ma maison est votre maison. Today, I want to repeat that our cause, the one that drives me, is that of an open and confident society, a welcoming place in which there is only one level of citizenship and the same for all. Everyone, of course, will carry this message over the next few days. The challenge will be to carry it forth after, with force, strength, consistency. Words spoken, words written as well, are not trivial. It is up to us to formulate them, to choose them. These words can unite, heal, or they can divide and hurt. It's up to us to choose. We will know more in the upcoming days because we need to understand. In a few hours, we will walk together to express our rejection of this horrible violence. Let us also walk for friendship, mutual understanding, brotherhood among peoples. This is a choice this tragedy has brought us to. I want you to know that my choice as Premier of Quebec, as your Premier, is that of confidence, of openness, of a citizenship that is truly and fully shared for all, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of our beliefs or of who we love. Dear Quebecers, this is the Quebec that we dream of. This is the Quebec we have chosen, the one that we will continue to build together. Our common home, in which la chambre d'amis sera telle qu'on viendra des autres saisons pour se bâtir à côté d'elle. Thank you and good evening. Merci.
Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard developing similar themes to what he's talked about already today, the act of unity, the need to come together, that we are all Quebecers. The references again there to words, which he spoke of earlier today, that words can heal and they can unite, or words can divide and they can hurt. We're seeing similar sentiments to what politicians in Ottawa have been saying as well in the House of Commons, asking for the unity and very quickly taking this incident in this mosque in Quebec City and giving it national implications in terms of the need to understand it, in terms of the need to move forward. And a continuing theme we're seeing from Canadian politicians throughout this is the idea that Canada is being looked to as an example. The Quebec Premier saying that people are looking at Quebec, the whole world watching his reference there. We've heard similar comments from the politicians speaking in Ottawa as well. This may be the takeaway from this, for many, the larger themes, the larger lessons, and in view of world events, the way things are going, perhaps something that Canada can contribute, some sort of hope that can come out of this tragedy. I want to take you now to Ottawa, where question period has just begun. Let's listen in.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are shocked by the terrorist attack against a Quebec City mosque yesterday night. We offer our sincerest condolences to the families of the victims, and we wish a prompt recovery to those who are injured. All Canadians have the right to practice their religion. They should feel free to do so safely. The people who committed this horrific crime must be brought to justice. And we would like to thank the federal government. What will its response be? The Honourable Prime Minister, I'd like to thank the Leader of the Official Opposition for her question and for her leadership and the leadership of all members in this House in this difficult time. We stand with the Muslim community of Canada, the community of Quebec City, who is suffering right now because of this tragedy. We are working together with all levels of government. I spoke with Premier Couillard, Mayor Labaume, and many other people who are working very hard on the ground to address the situation, to find out what happened. The investigation is ongoing, but Canadians should know that we stand together as Canadians, and we will do so in the weeks, months, and years to come. We know that diversity is one of the strengths of our country, and our Muslim brothers and sisters are important for all of Canada. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Last year, this House unanimously voted to recognize that violence perpetrated by ISIS against the Yazidi people constitutes genocide, and committed to providing asylum to women and girls from this persecuted minority within 120 days. Time is almost up, and the U.S. travel ban on refugees from the region has made this rescue operation all the more critical. Can the Prime Minister update this House on how many Yazidi women and children have made it safely to Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question. The new Minister of Immigration is working very hard on this file. We know that the end of February deadline is rapidly approaching, and the solidarity shown by all members of this House standing with the vulnerable Yazidi people and wanting to do more here in Canada is something we take very seriously, which is why we are working very hard on this issue, and look forward to having positive things to announce in the coming weeks.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, a lot has changed for Canada in the last few months. The new U.S. administration is lowering taxes and cutting regulations with a promise to bring back jobs to America. Canadians are worried this means their jobs might be heading south. When is the Prime Minister going to get serious and present a plan to protect our workers and their families?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the focus of this government is on growing the middle class and supporting those who are working hard to join the middle class. And that means good jobs for Canadians, which is why we've recognized that building a strong economy and protecting the environment need to go hand in hand, which is why we've approved pipelines at the same time as we're making innovative measures towards lowering our emissions and creating the clean, green jobs of the future. We're investing in training for workers. We're investing in post-secondary education and research facilities. We know that we need to be smart about our investments to create the good jobs of the future, and that is the primary focus of this government.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Conflict of Interest Act is clear about the Prime Minister accepting travel on private aircraft. And it says, I quote, "No Minister of the Crown shall accept travel on private aircraft for any purpose unless required in his or her capacity as a public office holder or in exceptional circumstances or with the prior approval of the Commissioner." So, Mr. Speaker, we know the Prime Minister violated the Act in this context. So my question is simple. Why does the Prime Minister think the rules don't apply to people like him?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member well knows, my office is working very closely with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner to resolve all these questions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order.
Mr. Speaker, this is the first time that the Ethics Commissioner has launched a formal investigation into the behaviour of a Prime Minister. This is not good for the country, especially when Canadians need their Prime Minister focused on jobs. They need him focused on his job and jobs for Canadians, not distracted by ethics investigations. How can Canadians have confidence the Prime Minister is focused on their interests when he's spending all of his time defending his own?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was pleased to get out across the country to 10 different town halls where I heard directly from Canadians who, yes, are very worried about their jobs, are very worried about the future we're building together. And that's why I was able to highlight the significant investments we're making in Canadians' future, of defending Canadian jobs, of building the jobs of tomorrow, of working with Canadians to ensure that we have the skills to take on the challenges and the opportunities that are coming at us in the coming years. That is the focus of this government. That's what we will remain focused on.
Honorable député d'Outremont.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in Quebec City, a number of the members of the Muslim community were murdered while they prayed at the Great Mosque. Our sympathies and our prayers and our love all go out to the families and loved ones of these victims. What does the Prime Minister intend to do to ensure that these religious institutions across Canada are kept safe? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, our authorities and our communities are being vigilant and monitoring our religious institutions of all faiths, but at the same time we know that the best way to defend Canadians is to have a united society that is full of compassion, that helps each other and who are there for each other. Yes, we will be vigilant, but we will also underscore the fact that we are strong, not despite our differences, but because of them, and we will always work together.
The loss and suffering in Quebec City is being felt across the country and indeed throughout the world. The mosque in question had been the target of hateful acts in the past, and the victims were murdered last night in the middle of prayer. Will the Prime Minister commit to immediate support for the affected families, and will he also commit to greater dialogue with concerned religious and faith groups across the country?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, over the past hours, but indeed over the past months and years, all Canadians, all parliamentaries, not just of our party, have been very much engaged with faith leaders in their communities as MPs, as community leaders. We are very aware of the pressures of intolerance that exist within our country and around the world, and we know that opening dialogue, fostering understanding, reducing ignorance, and combating fear and division with unity and messages of positive and hope are the kinds of things that we need to do a lot more of, and I look forward to working with the member opposite and all.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
Mr. Speaker, the American president has implemented a ban on all individuals from a number of Muslim countries. There have been no justifications offered, but we all know that there can be no justification for this. Does the Prime Minister agree that this targeting of people based on their religion or place of birth is an affront to our shared values as Canadians and supporters of human rights across the world?
Honourable Prime Minister.
I will always stand to defend the Canadian values of openness, of diversity that we cherish so much, that we understand are essential not just to our success in the past, but our success in the future. We are a strong, united people that are generous and open because we've seen how much openness to the world and diversity not only makes us more prosperous, but more safe as a country and as communities. I will continue to stand for Canadian values any chance I get in this House and elsewhere. Merci beaucoup.
Member for Outremont.
Mr. Speaker, further to the American announcement of this ban implemented on people from Muslim countries, we in Canada were proud to see the government take measures to offer temporary residence to people who were banned from entering the United States. But now, the government must commit to taking the next step in this collaborative effort. What does the Prime Minister intend to do to provide permanent support to the thousands of refugees who are now banned from the United States? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I can say that once again, I am tremendously proud of Canadians, individuals, communities, municipalities, provinces who are all open to doing more, who have promised to be there, to be more open, and provide even more support. So I asked the Minister of Immigration to look at the different ways that we can help out. And obviously, I'm open to discussing this with all the members in this House to see how we can once again show the planet that being open, generous, and compassionate is good for us, it's good for our economy, and it's good for our security. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, one of the resolutions of our Prime Minister should be to obey the law.
That was question period unfolding, and a variety of topics being discussed there, but a lot of it focusing on, in particular, the events that have happened in Quebec City. Answers from the Prime Minister there, dealing with, again, underlining what he made the comments when the session opened, to talking about Canadian values, effectively talking about openness, freedom of religion, inclusivity, all of those, using this to underline the broader concerns. Evan Dyer has been watching with us and listening in as well. Evan, once again, what did you take away from what they were talking about in Ottawa today?
Well, I think we saw once again an example of that fine line that Justin Trudeau is trying to walk between not offending the Trump administration on the one hand, not drawing Trump's ire onto Canada, which so far appears to have pretty effectively dodged that bullet, while at the same time, as he puts it, standing up for Canadian values, which of course means keeping the door open to people regardless of what country they come from, judging them on their individual merits as immigrants, and you know, being generally respectful and tolerant of diversity. We saw there Tom Mulcair pushing him to say that it is an affront, that the visa ban in the United States is an affront to shared values of Canadians. And we saw Justin Trudeau respond quite carefully by standing up and saying, I'll always defend Canadian values. And indeed, he's never shrunk back from proclaiming his support for diversity. But he did not take that extra step and call Trump's actions an affront. And what we see there is both Justin Trudeau trying to be careful and position his party against Trump without being explicitly, overtly anti-Trump, while we also see the NDP trying to position itself as the party of the real anti-Trump sentiment, as the party that's willing to come out and, as Tom Mulcair has done in the past, call Trump a fascist, as the party that's willing to denounce him head on. And I think that the NDP sees there an opportunity in the Trump administration to sort of put a division between itself and Justin Trudeau, who's been very successful at taking some of its progressive cards away from it, and to sort of to bring back into focus the difficulty that Trudeau has in dealing with the Trump administration, that the responsibilities of being in government, the limiting effect that has on what you can say, while the NDP is much freer to express some of the anti-Trump anger we see from the left-hand side of the political spectrum. And I think they're hoping that that will help them in the future.
And not just Trump or anti-Trump. I think what we're seeing, Evan, we're seeing this from the Quebec Premier as well, and really from all the federal leaders, trying to understand that Canada, either in the Trump world or in view of what is happening in Western Europe as well, that Canada could be a beacon, that Canada could be a place for people to come, talented, educated people to come to seek a better life. Are you getting a sense of that as well?
Well, I mean, we've certainly seen that recent elections, recent referenda around the world, thinking Brexit here, for example, or Italy, and the downfall of Matteo Renzi have taken a toll on the progressive side of the political spectrum right around the West, and really left, if you like, left Justin Trudeau as a sort of the doyen of that side of the spectrum. He really is, right now, when you think about it, the most prominent left or left of center leader anywhere in the West at the moment. And I think, you know, Barack Obama, even when he was here in Ottawa for his farewell visit, referenced that, almost sort of anointing Justin Trudeau. Of course, at that point, he thought that he would be succeeded by Hillary Clinton. No doubt this would be an even stronger sentiment now, anointing Justin Trudeau as the heir of his progressive tradition. And so Canada does find itself in a position of being still very open to refugees and immigrants, and and forcefully so, openly so, declaratively so, while many other countries, not just the United States, are instituting more and more controls. You know, we didn't notice this because of the controversial nature of the Muslim ban in the United States sort of sucking the air out of all the other news, but last week France, Belgium and the Netherlands instituted passport controls on trains passing through their territory. It's the first time really that passport controls have come back since the Schengen group was created, the No Borders group was created within the European Union. And we see anti-migrant sentiment rising in Europe. We see far-right parties making huge gains. Marine Le Pen and the National Front leading the polls in France, and in a number of other European countries, the right making significant gains. So certainly Justin Trudeau does appear to be bucking that trend.
And so much has happened so fast. Thanks for this, Evan. CBC's Evan Dyer in Ottawa. You can track the latest updates on the deadly mosque shooting in Quebec online. You can go to our website to check out our live blog for developments on that story throughout the day. And of course, we have you covered right here on CBC News Network. We're back in a moment.
Sadness, very big sadness in our community. And it's a very, very big tragedy.
Leaders came together in Quebec City to express shock and grief over the deadly mosque shooting. 6 people were killed and several others wounded when a gunman opened fire during evening prayers last night. Police have 1 suspect in custody. The Prime Minister has announced he will be traveling to Quebec City later today. We got a medical update earlier on some of the victims of last night's attack. 5 people were taken to hospital from the mosque in critical condition.
So there's 2 patients that have sustained significant injury into mainly the abdomen. They also have other injury on their arms, their legs, and so on. For now, as we say in surgery, bleeding has stopped. Okay, so the life is saved. However, there is significant care that needs to be done in the following days and weeks. Other surgery are planned and will happen in the future for those patients. They're stable, but it's still critical. And today, what we did last night is basically saving their lives. But today we have to make sure that we're not forgetting anything. So we go with fresh eyes and we go across everything.
You heard the reference there to stable condition. Some could be discharged from hospital today. Yusuf Badat is an Imam in Toronto, and he's also the Canadian Council of Imams, and he joins us now. So thank you for joining us, sir. Can we just get your initial thoughts on when you first heard the news of this attack on the mosque?
It was obviously very shocking. The reason being is that this is a place of prayer. We're in our beautiful country, Canada, which is generally safe. And there's a lot of respect and peace and understanding. So it was very shocking, and there was a sense of fear and grief as well.
We've heard of, for example, a pig's head being placed on the steps of this particular mosque. These sorts of things do make headlines and will likely even more so now in the aftermath of these tragic events. But Do you hear of incidents at mosques across the country that are perhaps not even reported, but you still feel threatened by?
There are definitely certain events that occur within the framework of various mosques and Islamic institutions. Sometimes some of them are considered minor and they're not reported. But recently, many of the imams and the mosque leadership, they have made a decision, and they're making the general public from the Muslim congregants aware that if any incident, regardless of being small, minor, or big, it must be reported so that the stats are there and the information is there so that we can deal with the issues, whether it's a hate crime or whether it's Islamophobia or extremism, whatever the case may be.
A mosque is, of course, a place of worship. It's a sanctuary. It's a place where you go to feel safe, to commune with your God. What are you telling members of your mosque and others across the country who might be feeling a little scared right now?
Well, basically trying to comfort them that generally Canada is a great place to be. And, we shouldn't feel that this type of tragedy will spill over. But at the same time, we need to take our precautions. So, for example, at our mosque here, what we've done is we've hired a security company, and they'll be full-time looking after the premises. We're also, informing our staff that they need to be a little extra vigilant and, make sure the gates are locked and the doors are locked once you're in the facility. We're also comforting our youth and the children who come for classes here that, if there is any concern or anything on your mind, then let's talk, let's get the necessary help. The local police agency, the Toronto Police here, have, visit us for some of the prayers, and they're constantly outside, taking care in case something is happening. So we're getting a lot of support, and we're also working hand in hand with others, whether it be our own community or from the broader community or the agencies.
You mentioned the children. We all know how children just say what's on their minds. There's no filter there. How are you going to tell your children and the children in your congregation when they have questions about what happened in Quebec City?
Well, obviously, children are inquisitive. I got a question from an 11-year-old this morning saying, will something like this happen in our mosque? So I comforted the child. So young minds, they need comfort and they need the guidance. So we have to explain to them that it has occurred, and this is a news story. This is something that people are talking about. It's in the media. You'll hear about it as you go home or as you come into school. But, we need to do our part in making sure that we are secure, and we are here for you as community members. Your parents are there for you, so we are here to support you and help you. So it's just giving them a sense of comfort and trying to give them the understanding of the occurrences of what has happened.
And finally, briefly, can I ask you, what is your advice to other Canadians, the other 35 million Canadians, in dealing with friends, neighbors who may be Muslim? What is your advice to them?
Well, it goes a long way when our fellow Canadians send us emails or tell us we understand what you're going through, and we support each other and we stand together. Whether, this case, whether it's Islamophobia related or a hate crime, or whether it's something internal of some extremist and a radical who's amongst the Muslim community who is doing this. Regardless of the situation, we'll leave it up to the authorities to make the decision. But both of these issues, Islamophobia and extremism, they stem from the very same hate. They're fed by the very same hate that creates these type of problems. So, I would tell the average Canadian that, all of you are great people and you know what's right and wrong, and we need to stand together as a Canadian family against all forms of hate, against all forms of violence, and live and coexist peacefully with all religions and all communities.
Good advice, and thanks for sharing it with us. Yusuf Badat is with the Canadian Council of Imams, and he joined me from Toronto. There are a number of vigils planned today in remembrance. There will be one in Quebec, in Montreal, tonight at 6 p.m. near the Jean Talon rail station. There'll also be one in Quebec City, in London, Ontario. And in Toronto, 3 vigils are planned. We're back in a moment. I want to take you now to Saskatoon. The Premier of Saskatchewan just spoke to reporters about that deadly attack at a Canadian mosque.
You know, it's just unspeakably horrific that this shooting has occurred, that lives have been lost, and so many others are injured. And as I understand, I don't have the very latest information, but some are quite literally fighting for their lives. And we don't know the reasons why, but I'm not sure that matters today. Today our thoughts and prayers are with all of those that were impacted by this, with the families of the victims and those who are fighting for their lives, and for anybody impacted by this. Saskatchewan sends their thoughts and prayers.
Is there a message it means something for the Muslim community here in Saskatchewan?
Oh, I think so. I credit the mayor. I know he's been in contact with mosques in the city, with the community, and you know, I think it would be. I don't want to put words in his mouth or in the mouths of the people that he's talked to, but it would be surprising if it didn't impact on Muslims living across the rest of this country. How could it not?
Is there a message at all with the cities in Saskatchewan about heightening security for mosques?
Sure. What we've done, I had a brief exchange with our Attorney General today. We have set up a protocol already through through the Justice Ministry, which also includes public safety, which also includes that the work direct with the direct work that we do with police agencies and the RCMP in the province. And so today we had a brief exchange that he was going to be ensuring and double checking with our own senior officials of government that those protocols are in place and any measures that any proactive measures that can be taken are being taken. Well, there's no indication of any concern, any specific threat or danger, but just that we would continue to be as proactive as we have been. And I'd had this discussion. We have had as a province several years back where we need that kind of protocol and relationship, both with our cities and their police forces, but also in a general sense with the community. In this case, the Muslim community.
Do you have a message for the Muslim community here in Saskatoon? Call this place home.
You know, from many people's strength, we are so proud and happy that they're here. A big number of newcomers that have come to our province are Muslim, and they have in a very direct way not only just helped build the Saskatchewan advantage, the economic advantage, they made the quality of life better. It is a better place for the diversity that they've brought, you know, in this last election, we saw the very first Muslim candidate get elected. He was a Saskatchewan Party candidate in Regina, and things have changed for the better in this province for the newcomers that have come and for the diversity. And I just want them to know that we're going to work with them, do whatever we can, so that they continue to feel very welcome, that this is their home, but also that this is a safe place for them.
And speaking to that.
Those comments from Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall just moments ago. We'll have a look at Parliament Hill now. The flag is flying at half-mast for the victims of that deadly mosque attack in Quebec. We're expecting to hear from the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, next hour. We'll bring that to you live here on CBC News Network.
We are all Quebecers. The whole world is watching us. Together, it is time to show who we are, to show the best of ourselves.
New this hour, a call for unity from Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard in the wake of the deadly mosque shooting. 6 people died and more than a dozen were wounded after a gunman opened fire last night in Quebec City. We're learning new information about the victims. One was a father of 2 young children, another was a professor. We'll have those details for you this hour.
To the family members of these innocent victims, to the people of Quebec, and to all Canadians, know that we will get to the bottom of this. Such senseless violence has no place in Canadian society.
The Prime Minister has condemned the fatal mosque attack. Trudeau called it a terrorist act committed against all Canadians. The Prime Minister will be traveling to Quebec City later today, joined by 2 opposition party leaders. We're tracking the latest on the victims and the investigation. I'm John Northcott. You're watching CBC News Network. It's now more than 19 hours since the attack, and the story continues to unfold. Here are the latest developments. The lone suspect in the case is slated to appear in court this afternoon. We also know all the victims, the 6 dead and 18 wounded, were men shot as they prayed. 2 of those seriously injured will need ongoing surgery. Police are also stationed outside every mosque throughout the province of Quebec, as well as lowering flags on Parliament Hill. And at the province's National Assembly, a vigil will take place tonight to honor the victims. The Prime Minister will head to Quebec City later to express his support for the community. Our Catherine Cullen is in Quebec City and will bring you the latest in just a few minutes. The attack in Quebec has taken the province and the entire country. The Prime Minister and the leaders of the 2 opposition parties are about to leave Ottawa for Quebec City. Justin Trudeau invited the others to join him for the vigil being held there this evening. Earlier in the House of Commons, he spoke for Canadians and to Canadians about this country's Muslim community.
Canadians will not be broken by this violence. Our sense of spirit and our sense of unity will only strengthen. The people who commit these acts mean to test our resolve and weaken our values. They aim to divide us, to sow discord and plant hatred. We will not close our minds. We will open our hearts. Mr. Speaker, my friends, my fellow Canadians, let us strive to be the best version of ourselves in these dark hours. To the more than 1 million Canadians who profess the Muslim faith, I want to say directly, we are with you. 36 million hearts are breaking with yours. And know that we value you. You enrich our shared country in immeasurable ways. It is your home. Last night's horrible crime against the Muslim community was an act of terror committed against Canada and against all Canadians. We will grieve with you, we will defend you, we will love you, and we will stand with you. Over the coming days, take solace in one another. We will mourn this devastating attack, and we will heal together as one community, as one country, and as one family. Canadians will not be intimidated. We will not meet violence with more violence. We will meet fear and hatred with love and compassion. Always. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CBC's Evan Dyer has been watching reaction to the Quebec City attack in Ottawa, and he joins us now. So, Evan, listening in as we have been this afternoon, what's the message that politicians in Ottawa want to get out?
Well, as we heard in that clip from Justin Trudeau about an hour ago, his main message there was directed to the Muslim community of Canada, the 3% of Canadians who profess Islam as their religion, saying, you know, we stand by you. And I think we've heard that echoed by other parties as well, trying to make the point that the Muslim community should not feel abandoned by its leaders or by other members of Canadian society, that rather they're an integral part of this country and that they will be supported going forward after this event. So that's one message we heard from all. Justin Trudeau, though, during his remarks in the House of Commons, did have a message, a very mild message for his fellow MPs, and that was to say he wanted to remind them, he said, that they are all leaders of communities, and he just left it there. We heard from some of the other parties, though, particularly the NDP, some talk about the politics, those who peddle the politics of fear and division, the beginnings, perhaps, of an attempt to look beyond just the shooter who has apparently claimed responsibility for this attack to a sort of a wider area of responsibility of those who perhaps created a climate where this could occur. And of course, we are talking about a climate that is not confined to the borders of Canada. There was also some debate today about the measures brought in the United States and the so-called Muslim visa ban, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about that in the days to come, and already we've heard a lot about that from the New Democrats. But generally the message has been restrained in the beginning from Canadian politicians, and of course there's also been restraint on the side of not leaping to conclusions about the motives behind the shooting until we know a little bit more.
Well, as you say, having a lot of fine lines to walk on this. Also, they want to be able to reflect the shock and sadness of Canadians. At the same time, though, parties want to advance their concerns politically as well. What does the opposition want the government to do in the wake of this attack?
Absolutely. I think we saw a little bit of that happening during question period, where there was a sort of a subtext. I just mentioned some of it there with the comment about politics of fear and division and Justin Trudeau's own comments about people being leaders in their communities. There was a subtext of criticism of those who have perhaps heightened a climate of fear of Muslims. And we also saw Rona Ambrose in question period say, for her part, that no member of this House of any caucus would wish any of this on anyone, as if rejecting the idea that perhaps that kind of talk might somehow be linked to the motives for this attack. But the NDP clearly is pushing the Prime Minister to go further, not just with regards to this, but with regards to what's been happening in the United States, the ban on people immigrating from those 7 majority Muslim countries. And we saw an exchange between Tom Mulcair and Justin Trudeau where Mulcair pushed the Prime Minister to be tougher in his language about that. Let's watch that.
The mosque in question had been the target of hateful acts in the past, and the victims were murdered last night in the middle of prayer. Will the Prime Minister commit to immediate support for the affected families, and will he also commit to greater dialogue with concerned religious and faith groups across the country?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, over the past hours, but indeed over the past months and years, all Canadians, all parliamentaries, not just of our party, have been very much engaged with faith leaders in their communities as MPs, as community leaders. We are very aware of the pressures of intolerance that exist within our country and around the world, and we know that opening dialogue, fostering understanding, reducing ignorance, and combating fear and division with unity and messages of positive and hope are the kinds of things that we need to do a lot more of, and I look forward to working with the member opposite.
So Tom Mulcair went on there to push Justin Trudeau to condemn as an affront to Canadian values the other big sort of, if you want to call it this, is sort of Islamophobia controversy in the media in recent days. Justin Trudeau did say he would stand up for shared values of Canadians at any opportunity, but he didn't go so far as to call it an affront or to offer any criticism of President Trump's executive order. So we see him still try to walk a fine line, but certainly not being backwards in standing up to defend the rights of Muslims in Canada.
Evan, thanks for this. CBC's Evan Dyer in Ottawa.
Thanks.
Muslim leaders in Quebec City say they are proud to be both Quebecers and Canadians. One of them made an emotional appeal, calling for people to remember the victims as fathers and valuable contributors to society.
I have a message for all the media to try to personify the dead people. Because we have professors in university, we have shopkeepers, and we have many kind of key contribute to society. And I want for the media to personify the dead people. Each one It's a family, papa of family, and father. And I want that this humanity be in your media, to express this in media, please. Because me, for example, I have a friend that's a professor in university. I know him very well. It's a very, very, very gentleman. How this man dead as in circumstances like that? It's a very, very, very big tragedy for us, and we have a sadness. We cannot express our sadness.
That was Muslim community leader Mohammed Labidi speaking in Quebec City earlier. As we go to break, here's a look at some of the scenes from that attack on the mosque in Quebec City. We're back in a moment. We're watching the foyer of the House of Commons this hour. We're expecting to hear from the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, in just a few minutes on the attack at that mosque in Quebec. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded when a gunman opened fire during evening prayers last night. A court appearance is expected late this afternoon for the suspect. The Prime Minister has announced he will be traveling to Quebec City today. The story continues to unfold. The CBC's Catherine Cullen is in Quebec City tracking the developments, and she joins me now once again live. So, Catherine, we're learning more about some of those killed. What can you tell us?
Well, that's right, John. We've been able to confirm the names of 3 of the 6 victims, and I can tell you a little bit about them, starting with Azzedine Soufiane. He was the owner of a halal butcher shop and a grocery just about a kilometer from this mosque, also a father, and somebody who a lot of members of the Muslim community here in Quebec City tell us helped welcome people into the community and help them, and particularly newcomers to Canada. We can also tell you that one of the victims is Khaled Belkacemi. He was a professor at Université Laval, specialized in agri-food and soil engineering, and as well Boubacar Tabti. He was Tunisian. He's lived in Quebec since 2011, the father to children who were 3 and 11 years old. So a bit of a portrait there, just a few really scant details, but giving you a sense of some of the lives that were taken yesterday. And there has been a lot of emphasis on that today from both Muslim leaders, the Premier of Quebec, various people who have spoken out, talking about the fact that these are not just people, but of course they all have stories. This is going to have an impact. They all have family members, and people are still asking themselves today how something like this could have happened.
So many questions still unanswered, as you say, Catherine. What more do we know about the police investigation? The lone suspect Originally thought 2, but now 1, due to appear in court later today, we now understand.
Yes, some confusion about the timing of that, but that is our understanding. We've also gotten a bit more information from Quebec City Police more broadly about the investigation. I think you can see behind me part of the command center next to the mosque, the investigation continuing. We certainly have seen activity throughout the day, but the head of the Quebec City Police telling our colleagues that they have reached out to CSIS and that CSIS said that they were not aware of any previous threat to this mosque, that the suspect in this case was unknown to police. And also, there had been that one other incident at this mosque that was very well publicized, a pig's head that was left here in the lead up to Ramadan. Police have not found any connection between the shooting last night and that particular incident.
Catherine, thanks for this. CBC's Catherine Cullen in Quebec City. You can also track the latest updates on the deadly mosque shooting in Quebec online. You can go to our website, check out the live blog of developments on the day, on the story throughout the day. And of course, we'll have you covered right here on CBC News Network. We're back in a moment.
Sadness, very big sadness in our community. And it's a very, very big tragedy.
Leaders came together in Quebec City to express shock and grief over last night's deadly mosque shooting. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen others wounded when a gunman opened fire during evening prayers. A court appearance is expected late this afternoon for the suspect. The Prime Minister has announced he will be traveling to Quebec City today. CBC's Sean Henry is in Montreal and joins us live with a view from that city. Thanks for joining us, Sean. So,
hi, John.
How are Muslim leaders and the people in the community reacting?
Yeah, John, they're shocked but not surprised. All day long, they've been telling one story after another about when their mosque was attacked or when they themselves received threats. We've heard stories like anti-Islamic stickers on mosques, windows broken. One Muslim leader in this community said someone actually shot through his window, and they say no amount of security or precautions seems to be stopping this behavior. You might remember about three and a half years ago, there was a debate in this province about whether civil servants should be wearing religious headwear. And some Muslim leaders say the nasty tone of that debate lingers today, but never did they expect a shooting like what happened yesterday in Quebec City.
The school board officials in Quebec City, they held a news conference earlier. This obviously a huge concern for them. What did they say?
Yeah, educators struggling to figure out the right words to say to these students. At one school board in particular, many students there have relatives who were victims. And a school board official said that these kids are essentially caught up in what's an adult problem, because otherwise they play with other students, they get along well with other students, and now they're left confused. So they will be provided with counseling, as will other students. And everybody's really just trying to make sense of what happened yesterday.
Thanks for this, Sean.
You're
CBC's Sean Henry in Montreal. We're learning the names of some of the victims of the shooting. Arthi Pohl joins us with more on that. So Arthi, what can you tell us?
Well, we know that 6 people in total were killed in that brutal attack on the mosque last night in Quebec City, and now we've identified at least 3 of those victims. So a little bit about each of them. Azzedine Soufiane was an owner of a grocery store and halal butcher shop that operated just about a kilometer away from the Islamic Cultural Center where this shooting took place. Also, he's a father and was known throughout the community as a father figure, someone who helped introduce newcomers to the Muslim community as well. Some who were remembering him today called him nice, social, liked by all his customers, and said that he'd lived in Quebec for more than 10 years. Another victim that is being identified today, Khalid Belkacemi, was a professor at Laval University teaching in the Department of Soil and Agri-Food Engineering. He obtained his Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Algeria and had obtained a PhD from Sherbrooke University in 1990. Now, we also know that flags at the University of Laval are flying at half-mast to honor his death as well. And finally, Boubacar Tabdi was a Tunisian man who lived in Quebec since 2011. He was also a father of 2 children aged 3 and 11 years old. Now, officials have told us that all 6 of the victims were men between the age of 35 and 60 years old. We do have a photo of the University of Laval professor to share with you as well, and this is from the website. This is one of the victims, Khalid Belkacemi. Again, he was one of the victims of this horrific attack that took place in Quebec City on Sunday. Also, in terms of the victims, we know that for their families, a GoFundMe account has been set up to raise funds for their funeral. So far, it sits at $50,000.
Arthi, as we start to hear the stories of the dead, the struggle continues for those who are wounded, those in some cases fighting for their lives in hospital. What is the latest on that?
Well, you know, John, there were at least 50 people inside of the mosque at the time of the shooting. We know that several were taken to a hospital. 3 are expected to be released soon. 2 were in serious condition, and in fact, they would need more surgery as well. We do have a quick clip from a hospital official. Take a listen.
So there's 2 patients that have sustained significant injury into mainly the abdomen. They also have other injury on their arms, their legs, and so on. For now, as we say in surgery, bleeding has stopped. Okay, so the life is saved. However, there's significant care that needs to be done in the following days and weeks. Other surgery are planned and will happen in the future for those patients.
So some still dealing with significant injury as the community continues to mourn 6 lives also lost. John.
Thanks, Arthi. We're watching the foyer of the House of Commons this hour. We're expecting to hear from the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, any moment now on the attack at the mosque in Quebec. The Prime Minister will be traveling to Quebec City today. We'll be back in a moment here on CBC News Network.
To the more than 1 million Canadians who profess the Muslim faith, I want to say directly, we are with you. 36 million hearts are breaking with yours.
The Prime Minister shared his grief over the deadly shooting rampage at a mosque in Quebec City. Trudeau called it an act of terror against all Canadians. We can now tell you the name of the suspect. That name is Andre Bissonnette. 6 people were shot dead and more than a dozen injured when the gunman opened fire. Like many other Canadians, the Prime Minister and the leaders of the 2 main opposition parties will be attending a vigil tonight. They're traveling together to Quebec City in a show of solidarity to offer their condolences. Earlier, all 3 addressed the House of Commons. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say.
It was with shock and sadness that Canadians heard about a despicable act of terror last night in Quebec City. By current counts, 6 people worshipping at the Quebec City Islamic Cultural Centre have lost their lives, with many others seriously injured. This was a group of innocents targeted for practicing their faith. Make no mistake, this was a terrorist attack. It was an attack on our most intrinsic and cherished values as Canadians, values of openness, diversity, and freedom of religion. Our hearts go out to the families of the victims. These people were just that, people, ordinary Canadians. They were brothers, uncles, fathers, and friends. These were people of faith and of community. And in the blink of an eye, they were robbed of their lives in an act of brutal violence. I know that already there's a deeply personal connection here in this very House. The Member of Parliament for Louis Hébert knew this community and has joined them at the centre many times. He's with them now as we speak today. And to each of my 337 colleagues in this House, Mr. Speaker, remember that we are all leaders in our communities. At times like these, our communities need our leadership. It is in these moments that we must show ourselves worthy of the honor of sitting in this place for them. Reach out to your friends and neighbors. Gather your communities. Be there for their people, for your people.
We want to take you live to Ottawa. The Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, is speaking from the foyer of the House of Commons about the attack in Quebec. Let's listen in.
A speedy recovery to those who were injured. All Canadians are together in solidarity against this outrageous violence and are in support of a respectful, inclusive nature of which Canada is proud.
I want to congratulate the first responders, beginning with the Quebec City Police Service, who performed extremely well last night to deal with the situation and restore peace and security. In terms of jurisdiction, the Sûreté de Québec has primacy over police matters in the province generally under Quebec law. Since this situation potentially involves national security issues, the RCMP are also integrally involved. All police forces are working seamlessly together in a fully integrated manner. They also have the complete support of other federal agencies such as CSIS and the CBSA. Ces sortes de coopération
This
est
kind of
planifiée
cooperation
d'avance.
has been planned in advance. It has shown its efficiency last night. My counterpart, the Minister Couillard from Quebec, assured me that it worked very well.
I want to make a small but important point about the federal government's security infrastructure program, which provides financial support to communities at risk so they can protect themselves against violence, desecration, or harassment. The
application period for this funding program for the infrastructure plan of the government was to be concluded tomorrow. The Department of Public Safety has extended the closing date to enable schools and worship places and community centers to re-examine their infrastructure plans and possibly to strengthen them.
Let me just make 3 other points. First, there is no change being made in Canada's national terrorism threat level. It remains at medium, where it has stood since October of 2014. The most senior security officials in the Government of Canada assess and reassess that threat level on a continuous basis, 24/7, 365. There is no information known to the Government of Canada that would lead to a change at this time. But we are, of course, always vigilant. Secondly, I would say this: the lone wolves and the copycats are the toughest killers to deal with. They are often unpredictable. All police organizations, security and intelligence officers across the country are especially alert to any type of behavior or activity that could be aimed at vulnerable locations or vulnerable people. And I encourage all Canadians to be vigilant too. If you see or hear anything that makes you uneasy, please contact your local police service. Thirdly, and most importantly, we Canadians are all in this together. Diversity has always been our strength. Inclusion and cohesion are our hallmarks. We are the finest example of pluralism that the world has ever known. We will never allow fear and hatred to divide our people or scar our communities or compromise the way we want to live our lives. As you just saw in the House of Commons before and during question period, we stand together for what makes Canada, Canada.
Minister Goodale, you said lone wolves.
In fighting Islamic extremism, fighting foreign travelers. Have you invested enough? Have you spent enough time being investigated right-wing or xenophobic extremism without prognosticating on the estimated path? Have you invested enough in right-wing extremism?
The Government of Canada is vigilant all of the time through CSIS, through the RCMP, through our other agencies and services to maintain the right kind of surveillance and investigative powers to track the risks and the threats and the dangers that present themselves to Canadians and Canadian interests at home and abroad. In terms of the activities that are undertaken and the funding that is made available to support those activities, that is always under review to make sure that we're meeting 2 objectives. Number 1, doing everything we possibly can to keep Canadians safe. And number 2, to safeguard Canadian rights and freedoms.
You said lone wolves. You specifically went out of your way to say lone wolf and copycat attacks. Is that what police at this point believe is at play in the attack in Quebec?
Well, there is one person in custody at the moment, but the investigation is very early. These are preliminary stages of the investigation. The police will describe the nature of that investigation in the public domain to the best way they can when they feel they are in a position to do so. Bear in mind that they need to make absolutely sure that they are, in making any public comment, not compromising the nature or the effectiveness of their investigation.
You're reporting the date to submit projects for infrastructure.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When's that? What's the delay?
We haven't reestablished a firm concluding date now, but it's obvious with the circumstances in Quebec City that there may be other groups and organizations that perhaps hadn't thought of taking advantage of this program. That now might want to reconsider their position and make an application. So we think it's only fair and reasonable to extend the date. Yes, we're not. We will announce a new closing date at some point in the future. But we want all of these organizations to have the time they need to consider their situations, do whatever background work they need to do to assess their own vulnerability, and then if they think it's appropriate to make an application. We're not going to rush them.
That program you broadened it because people were not using it. So is it because maybe synagogues, mosques were underestimating the threat?
Well, that may be, although the people who are involved in religious organizations and centers and cultural organizations and centers have become, I think, over the last number of years, increasingly alert to the dangers and the problems that they might face. We thought it was wise to expand the program and to make it applicable to more types of security activities and services, and to better inform the groups and organizations across the country that this is available to them.
Because they were not asking for
I think in large measure because they may not have been aware that the program was there. Some were, but some not.
There has been a lot of calls for your government to...
We'll take that into account. We'll assess this as it goes on to see if that program is sufficiently well funded.
In terms of the immigration orders from the U.S. President, will you get written assurances for permanent residents, for dual citizens, that they will have indeed access to the United States as
The Prime Minister's office and the Office of the Immigration Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs will take all the steps that are necessary to make sure that the terms and conditions of the President's orders, insofar as they apply to Canada and Canadians, are clear. And that work is ongoing between those various offices and their counterparts in the United States.
On that, can I ask you, a couple of groups, Amnesty International, Council of Refugees, are asking your government to review. There's this bilateral agreement with the U.S. in terms of refugee claimants that says that the U.S. is a safe third country, and therefore if people come here through the U.S., they only need to apply for refugee status. In the U.S., they can't apply here. And groups are asking you to review this bilateral agreement, saying the U.S. is no longer a safe third country in light of the executive orders that were adopted last week. Are you guys considering it? Do you still think that the U.S. is a third safe country for refugee claimants now?
Well, you would have to address that question to the new minister responsible for immigration and refugees. He will make himself available. You can be assured he's had a very, very busy few days as a new minister, and he has done extraordinarily well.
But we're talking about border crossings, which is your file.
In terms of our border situation, we always make sure that it is functioning in the best interests of Canada and Canadians. We've made very clear through the words of the Prime Minister in the last couple of days that we have a very positive, constructive, inclusive, proactive position with respect to refugees in the world, and doing what Canada can properly do to protect them and defend them. And we will make sure that our practical policies at the border reflect those principles. Yes. This was an act of extreme violence directed against a particular group with the clear intent to intimidate and harm that group and to strike fear in their hearts. In the definition in broad terms of terrorism, they were trying to inflict terror, and that fits the definition.
Mr. Goodell, your government has been under a lot of pressure to move ahead with the de-radicalization center to open in March. Does this attack kind of add the pressure and the need for Canada to kind of stick its head out of the sand and look at the work that still needs to be done, especially with right-wing extremists?
Quebec, the province of Quebec, the city of Montreal in particular, but the province of Quebec has had for some time now a very well-developed program to deal with counter-radicalization to violence. In fact, there are many lessons that other jurisdictions across the country could learn from the Quebec experience. Our purpose nationally is to establish a national office that will be a coordinating center, a center of excellence, to provide additional resources to this work, not just in one province or jurisdiction, but all the way across the country, to pull together all of the best ideas, to make sure that all of the necessary resources are equally available across the country. What this incident reveals, I think, is that is a very important undertaking. and it's one that we were right to flag in the election campaign as an initiative we intended to undertake. That work is now ongoing. There was some money provided in the last budget, and we are in the process now, the final stages of the process, to identify the right person to lead that initiative and to make sure that we are as effective as we can possibly be. I've often made this point. As rapidly as I can possibly get it open, and if I can do it before March, I will. But the point is this: we pride ourselves on our diversity, on our inclusion, on our accommodation, our ability to make room for each other and understand each other and mutually respect each other in this country. If we want to preserve the nature of that kind of society, then we've got to get very good at counter-radicalization, to understand what draws people down that dark path to extremism and violence, and how best you can intervene with the right people at the right time in the right way to head off tragedies before they happen. And we are very dedicated to that objective.
Just on what we're hearing from the White House spokesperson today, he seems to be drawing a link between what happened in Quebec City and that it's a reminder of why the United States needs to be vigilant and why the United States needed to bring forward this executive order. So are these two things linked, what happened in Quebec City and the executive order that was issued?
Well, the fact of the matter is the investigation into these terribly tragic circumstances in Quebec is just beginning. The incident happened less than 24 hours ago. The police authorities are collecting all of the evidence to identify exactly who was involved and what was their motivation. And we don't have sufficient hard facts to be able to draw conclusions about motivation and the exact nature of this violent act. I'm not going to speculate on a police investigation. That is the last thing the Minister of Public Safety should do.
Minister, what he did was he said an attack on Muslim Canadians in Quebec was a justification or a reason for banning people from the U.S. from Muslim-majority countries. Does that argument hold any weight?
Look, what I can justify and defend and promote is the Canadian position. Canada has always prided itself on being an open, inclusive, cohesive, tolerant society that welcomes newcomers. The Prime Minister has made that abundantly clear in what he has said over this weekend and again today in the House of Commons. We will stand up strongly for the vision that we have of this great and wonderful, decent country. And it's a vision that we're convinced is shared by Canadians overwhelmingly.
Given what you just said, is it appropriate for the U.S. administration to be making those comments?
The U.S. administration is commenting on what they see as circumstances, quite frankly. From the Canadian point of view, because it's happening here, and because we've got a criminal investigation underway and a process is unfolding, it would not be appropriate for any minister to comment on those circumstances until we get the facts. And we're waiting for the facts. Good.
Oh, sorry. Minister of Public Safety Ralph Goodale speaking there, speaking specifically about what happened at that mosque in Quebec last night, dealing with a number of facts that in his department are relevant for Canadians to know, one of which at the top of that list is that the security threat in Canada still remains at medium. Now that goes back to October of 2014. That, of course, the attack on Parliament Hill, that is when that was raised to medium. He says there is nothing in the information that the agencies have available to them that would indicate that that terror threat should be raised beyond the medium level. So that remains at medium. He also warned against lone wolves and copycats, saying that they are the most dangerous in a situation like this, and the Canadian equivalent of the see something, say something. He says remain vigilant and contact law authorities should you ever see anything. And finally goes on to say that we are all in this together, that Canada is the most pluralistic society in the world, and we should continue that way. And we continue to track the latest in the breaking news from Quebec. You're watching CBC News Network.
A tragedy took place in our capital, our beautiful capital, so welcoming and peaceful. The whole world is watching us. Together, it is time to show who we are.
Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard called last night's rampage at a mosque an attack on all Quebec. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen others wounded when shots rang out during evening prayers. Alexandra Bissonnette has been named as the suspect. We're also learning more about the victims. Pardon me. One owned a butcher shop, another was a professor at Laval University, and a third arrived in Quebec almost 6 years ago from Tunisia. Reaction to this shooting is resonating across the country. Arthi Pohl has been tracking that and joins us now. So Arthi, what are you hearing?
Well, you know, John, it's not even just across the country. It is around the world as well. We know that a number of international leaders have also offered their condolences to Quebec, to Canada as well, because of this horrific attack that took place. But when we're talking about across the country, it's really shaken members of the Muslim community and as well those living in Quebec City. I mean, we heard from the Premier there that this is something that not only impacts those members of that community, but the entire province as well. And just a reminder here, we're talking about 50 people inside a mosque praying, a very vulnerable position when a gunman allegedly enters and opens fire. So just imagine how vulnerable, how insecure members of that community are feeling now, as though they have been targeted in one of those positions where it's the most compromising they can imagine themselves to be in. They were completely caught off guard. We heard from members of the community who were inside the mosque, as well as those who have friends who were inside of the mosque too. They said that a lot of these people have had experience with different threats. We know that this particular Islamic Cultural Center as well had been targeted last June. We know that a pig's head was left on its doorstep. There has been surveillance at mosques as well because of these threats, but certainly they were caught off guard. So many are feeling incredibly uneasy and frightened and shocked as well. We did hear from members of the Muslim community earlier today. They're quite emotional. Take a listen to this.
We are deeply, deeply touched by this solidarity, and it warms our hearts and it lessens our sorrow. Really, it does.
So really, this is a member of the community saying that so many people have come together in this time of sorrow to stand with them. And we know that just within the last hour, in fact, this Islamic Cultural Center has issued a statement on their Facebook page, and we want to share it with you. They say, "We are moved by what happened. The Muslim community is strong and will always be strong. Thanks for the hundreds of messages that come from our compatriots of Quebecois, of our community, from all over the world. We don't find the words. We don't find the words." So certainly so many are touched by the outpouring of support, but still also grieving this horrific loss, John.
Tonight, a vigil planned, people coming from really in some respects across the country. What more do we know about that?
You're right, John. These are individuals who are coming together really from across the country. So there are vigils that are being held in a number of different cities. But in particular, let's talk about the vigils that are being held in Quebec. In Quebec City, there is a vigil that is being held where we know the Prime Minister will be in attendance, as well as the Premier and a bunch of other elected officials. And we also have an individual, or a vigil rather, that is being held in Montreal. Now, this particular vigil, one of a few, I've looked at the Facebook page. So far, 12,000 have said that they are attending. If that's not an outpouring of support, I don't know what is. John.
Thanks for this, Arthi.
You're welcome.
The National Council of Canadian Muslims is calling on law enforcement agencies to step up security at mosque and Islamic centers across the country. Amira El-Gawagi is a spokesperson for the National Council. She spoke to us earlier from Ottawa.
You can only imagine the absolute shock and horror and despair that is descended not just on Canadian Muslim communities, but on the entire country. I think that what we've been hearing is that people are just in shock. How could anyone go into a place of worship, a place of sanctuary, where people are praying, they're there with their families, their children, and open fire on innocent victims? It's simply incomprehensible. And certainly right now, we are just bracing together to understand how this could have happened, why, and just really sending our love and condolences to the victims' families, to that community, and really standing together as Canadians in this very horrific moment. This is something that impacts, Quebec City, Quebec, Canada, and the whole world, really. And of course, any victim anywhere is someone that we mourn, and their families, we always will send our condolences to. In the aftermath of a tragedy like this, where there are people who have been killed, it is very important that local communities are working with their local police services to ensure that everyone stays safe, that a heightened sense of security is there, that we are encouraging anyone who sees anything suspicious to immediately report to police. We've already heard from police chiefs reaching out to their local communities to send them their support and let them know that they are vigilant. And of course, in the days to come, as we understand what happened in this situation, in this tragedy, we will be able to understand, what might be done in future to prevent such atrocities from happening.
That was Amira El-Gawabi with the National Council of Canadian Muslims in Ottawa. Here's another look at Parliament Hill this afternoon. The flag on the Peace Tower is flying at half-mast for the victims of the attack at that mosque in Quebec. Canada's Public Safety Minister spoke live this hour from the foyer of the House of Commons, not answering questions about the ongoing police investigation, but confirming that the threat level in the country remains at medium for the time being. Stay with CBC News Network. Breaking this hour, Alexandre Bissonnette, the man suspected of carrying out that deadly attack on a mosque in Quebec City, is due to make a court appearance. 6 people died and more than a dozen were injured after a gunman opened fire during evening prayers last night. We'll go live to Quebec City for the latest. And this is a live look at Parliament Hill. The flag on top of the Peace Tower is flying at half-mast this hour. The Prime Minister and opposition leaders are expected to travel to Quebec City for a vigil tonight. Each of them made emotional statements in the House of Commons earlier in the afternoon.
Last night's horrible crime against the Muslim community was an act of terror committed against Canada and against all Canadians.
This attack offers another sad reminder that our country is not immune to terrorism.
Canada is a country of diversity, peace, and inclusion. We cannot and we will not tolerate hate and violence. Today, our hearts are broken.
Good afternoon. I'm John Northcott with CBC News Network's breaking coverage of the Quebec City attack. This hour, we're also getting more information about the victims. For the very latest, let's turn to CBC's Catherine Cullen. She's in Quebec City at the scene of the deadly shooting and joins us now by phone. Catherine, we're expecting a suspect to appear in court possibly this hour. What can you tell us?
Well, John, we have confirmed that his name is Alexandre Bissonnette, that he was a student at Université Laval here in Quebec City, not all that far from where this shooting happened. We are also expecting an update in the very near future from both police and the prosecutor's office, in addition to that court appearance that, as you say, we are indeed waiting for. He was one of two people detained after these events, after this shooting last night. The other person, though, who was detained, police have since said is simply an important witness, a conclusion that they came to after doing some interviews with both of the people. Alexandre Bissonnette, now the only suspect that police have identified in this case.
In addition to a suspect, we're also learning more about those killed. What can you tell us about their stories, Catherine?
Yeah, John, I can tell you about three of the individuals, three of the six who were killed. We've learned a little bit about them. Let's start with Azzedine Soufiane. He's was the owner of a halal butcher and grocery shop that's not far from this mosque. He's a father, and a lot of people talked about him as being an important figure in the community, somebody who welcomed people who were arriving to Canada and Quebec, somebody who knew a lot of people. People speak about his warmth and are very shocked to hear that he was one of the victims of this attack. Khaled Belkacemi, he was a professor at Université Laval working in agri-food and soil engineering. Boubacar Tabti, he was a Tunisian who has lived in Quebec since 2011. We know that he has two children, a 3-year-old and an 11-year-old. So three of the six individuals who were killed in this shooting last night. There are still 5 people, the last update we've gotten from hospital officials, 5 people in critical condition. And I can also tell you, John, that there is a vigil that's planned here right outside the mosque later tonight to recognize this shooting, to commemorate victims of the attack, and to show solidarity with the Muslim community. And I was just speaking with an official from Quebec City. He expects that there will be 5,000 people coming out to this vigil tonight.
Remarkable. Thanks for this, Catherine. The CBC's Catherine Cullen in Quebec City. The attack in Quebec has shaken the province and the entire country. The Prime Minister and the leaders of the 2 opposition parties are about to leave Ottawa for Quebec City. Justin Trudeau invited the others to join him for the vigil being held there this evening. Earlier in the House of Commons, he spoke to Canadians and for Canadians to this country's Muslim community.
Canadians will not be broken by this violence. Our sense of spirit and our sense of unity will only strengthen. The people who commit these acts mean to test our resolve and weaken our values. They aim to divide us, to sow discord and plant hatred. We will not close our minds. We will open our hearts. Mr. Speaker, my friends, my fellow Canadians, let us strive to be the best version of ourselves in these dark hours. To the more than 1 million Canadians who profess the Muslim faith, I want to say directly, we are with you. 36 million hearts are breaking with yours. And know that we value you. You enrich our shared country in immeasurable ways. It is your home. Last night's horrible crime against the Muslim community was an act of terror committed against Canada and against all Canadians. We will grieve with you, we will defend you, we will love you, and we will stand with you. Over the coming days, take solace in one another. We will mourn this devastating attack, and we will heal together as one community, as one country, and as one family. Canadians will not be intimidated. We will not meet violence with more violence. We will meet fear and hatred with love and compassion. Always. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Prime Minister speaking earlier today, as did other political leaders in the House of Commons in advance of question period. People across Canada are in shock over last night's deadly shooting. My next guest was originally from Pakistan and says she never imagined such an attack could happen in a place of worship in Canada. Shaheen Ashraf is a national member of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. We've reached her in Montreal. Shaheen, 6 people killed in the mosque. When you heard the news, what was your reaction?
Heartbreaking, really. I mean, that's the only word that comes to mind is heartbreaking.
You come from a part of the world where attacks on places of worship are, if not commonplace, or certainly not unexpected. Let's talk a bit about what your expectations were for places of worship, Muslim places of worship in this country. Did you ever imagine something like this could happen here?
No. First of all, I'd like to share with you that all places of worship are sanctuaries and should be respected. And these things shouldn't be happening in these sanctuaries. We all go there to get some sense of peace, some sense of meditation, and these things shouldn't be happening in guns and things like that. Shouldn't be allowed. And I don't know. I mean, I have no words to express my feelings when I woke up in the morning and heard. I didn't hear it at night because I went to bed early. But when I woke up this morning and put the radio on at 5 a.m., I was beyond myself.
You've had a chance to let this sink in. The Muslim community in this country has had a chance to let this sink in. What are you hearing from people in terms of their reaction, in terms of the community reactions to this?
That we need to do more. We need to take action. I think the best action would be to create a curriculum that we teach the young children in school that we're all the same. And I mean, children, of course, by themselves know these things, that they all play together and all that. But the parents should be taught also to teach their young ones and behave in accordance with what is being taught. You know, that we all might look different. We might pray differently. The color of the skin could be different, but we're all the same.
We know that all the mosques in Quebec have some degree of police protection this evening. There will be another call to prayer in about an hour from now. How do you think yourself or other Muslims will feel about going into a mosque once again to pray?
And I mean, seriously, it's not going to happen right away, hopefully not. And I hope it never happens. But this is, you know, mosques and temples and synagogues shouldn't be having these kind of securities. You know, like anyone can walk in, anyone can sit down, anyone can be able to pray. What can I tell you?
Do you think that this increased police presence, as they say, we're seeing it in Quebec, do you think that is helpful to prevent this sort of thing from happening? Is it enough?
I think what would prevent was that we should ban all this sale of guns. I mean, we shouldn't be allowed to acquire guns just like that. And those were not, it was an automatic weapon. It wasn't even just a handgun. You know, it was an AK-47, they say. So where did he get this gun and why did he get it, you know? If he was a normal layman, a normal Quebecer. But the rhetoric of the people should change, in Quebec especially, you know.
How do you mean?
This started from Pauline Marois' time.
Tell us more about that. How do you mean? How should the rhetoric of Quebec politicians change?
The media and the politicians have a responsibility to their citizens. Okay, I think the media can play a very, very positive role by showing the humanity of people. And the politicians can help in that by like the speeches that were given today. I mean, if these speeches were given long time ago, these things wouldn't have happened. There's a lot of miscommunication between Quebecers and Muslim communities.
Shaheen Ashraf, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you for joining us. Shaheen Ashraf is the national member of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, and she is in Montreal. Still ahead, we're learning more about the victims of yesterday's deadly attack at that mosque in Quebec. The 6 men killed were between the ages of 35 and 60. Arthi Pohl will have more details coming up on CBC News Network.
Last night's horrible crime against the Muslim community was an act of terror committed against Canada and against all Canadians.
This attack offers another sad reminder that our country is not immune to terrorism.
Canada is a country of diversity, peace, and inclusion. We cannot and we will not tolerate hate and violence. Today, our hearts are broken.
That's the Prime Minister and opposition leaders speaking in the House of Commons earlier today. CBC's Evan Dyer has been watching reaction to the Quebec City attack in Ottawa, and he joins us now. Politicians in Ottawa trying to deal with this and still trying to make sense of it in their own way. What are they saying?
That's right, and of course they're dealing with an attack which is still being investigated in the very early stages of an investigation where the motives are not yet fully clear. I think we can all begin to suspect we know what they are, but it's not been confirmed by the authorities in charge of the investigation. So they're also limited in what they can say by that factor, but they're trying as well to be tasteful, to reassure the Muslim community. We heard that message from the leaders of all 3 major parties that they are members of Canadian society and that the rest of society has their back. But you do see the first bits of politics sort of creeping into this a little bit because, of course, these events are not happening in a vacuum. We've had for weeks now a lot of discussion about the place of Muslims in the West. This is a uniquely controversial time for that with the executive orders we saw signed in the States last week, well, the victory of Donald Trump generally. And it's not only there. You see also in Europe, for example, Geert Wilders, the leader of a very strongly anti-Islamic party, #1 in the polls there. Marine Le Pen, #1 or 2, going back and forth in the polls in France with the National Front. So there's a lot of this in the air, and also within the Conservative Party leadership race in Canada, we've seen a sort of a division between, on the one hand, the Kelly Leitch and to a lesser extent Stephen Blaney side of things, talking about identity politics and restricting immigration and refugee numbers. On the other side, we've seen people like Lisa Raitt, Deepak Oberoi, Michael Chong, and other candidates condemning that position. So it's in the air, and I thought that there was a reference to that during the statements by some of the leaders today in the House. Let's look at 2, one by Justin Trudeau and one by NDP leader Tom Mulcair.
And to each of my 337 colleagues in this House, Mr. Speaker, remember that we are all leaders in our communities. At times like these, our communities need our leadership. It is in these moments that we must show ourselves worthy of the honor of sitting in this place for them. Reach out to your friends and neighbors. Gather your communities. Be there for their people, for your people. They need you.
To our Muslim brothers and sisters, we mourn with you, we pray with you, and we promise that we will stand united and fight against the forces of hatred, bigotry, and Islamophobia, and against those who peddle the politics of fear and division.
So there you go. Those just sort of the inkling of some early comments, careful comments, slightly less careful perhaps from Tom Mulcair, but suggesting that politicians have a role to play in avoiding the kinds of tensions that lead to this kind of violence.
In a clear demonstration of how quickly events move, Evan, the big topic of Parliament Hill today was supposed to be Donald Trump's ban on those people traveling from the 7 Muslim-majority countries. Was there any talk of that today?
Well, there was. I mean, I think it was almost pushed off the agenda by what happened, but we did see a few questions about it, and of course it remains a very important question for the Government of Canada, because it's still not clear in writing, at least, exactly how this could affect Canadians, although we've had quite a few reassurances that it won't. But I guess we have to look at this and these two events as being a sort of a huge double hit, a double blow for the Muslim population of North America. You know, on the one hand, this ban was already something that they were reeling from, and now we see this first really serious anti-Muslim violence, because we haven't really seen this before at all. If you look around the West generally, actually since 9/11, one could point to Anders Breivik as a sort of perhaps a similar kind of a model, but then his selected victims were not actually Muslims. They were members of the country's governing party, so youth wing, as it were. So this is a season of unprecedented unease, I think, for Muslims here, and that was reflected in some of the debate we saw today on the Hill.
Evan, thanks for all your help on this story today. CBC's
Thanks.
Evan Dyer in Ottawa. You can also track the latest updates on that deadly mosque shooting in Quebec online. You can go to our website and check out our live blog for developments on the story throughout the day. And of course, we'll have you covered right here on CBC News Network. We're back in a moment.
there should be no fear ever of worshiping your God, our God, here in Ontario or in Canada.
And expressing enough solidarity and sympathy from Ontario's Premier Kathleen Wynne. She went to a Toronto mosque today in the wake of that deadly assault that killed 6 people in Quebec City. The suspect in the attack has now been identified as Alexandra Bissonnette. We're learning the names of some of the victims of the shooting. Arthi Pohl joins us with more on that. Arthi, we're hearing about lives lost. We're hearing about children without fathers. What more can you tell us?
Well, this is a terribly tragic event that took place on Sunday evening. We know 50 people were inside the mosque. More than 24 managed to escape. We know that more than a dozen were injured and 6 were killed. Of those 6, we know the identities of 3 and have some information about those 3 individuals to share with our viewers. First, the individual that I will identify, Azadine Soufiane. Now, all of the victims were men between the age of 35 and 60 years old. Soufiane was the owner of a grocery store and halal butcher shop, and this was just about a kilometer away from that Islamic Cultural Center where this entire shooting took place. Now, he was known throughout the community, was seen as a father figure, as someone who would help introduce newcomers to the rest of the community as well. The next victim who we have managed to identify, Khalid Belkacemi. Now, he was a professor at Laval University who was teaching in the Department of Soil and Agri-Food Engineering. He'd obtained a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Algeria, and he had obtained his PhD from Sherbrooke University in 1990. And finally, Boubacar Tabti. He was a Tunisian who lived in Quebec since 2011. He was also a father of 2 children aged 3 and 11. So both of those children now without their father. Now, we do have images to share with you of some of those victims as well. So first we'll show you the image of Azadine Soufiane. Now, this is that man who is seen to be a father figure in the community, and that also is that halal butcher shop that he has in the grocery store that is not far, again, from the scene of this attack that took place on Sunday night. We also have an image to show you of Khalid Belkacemi, and he was the professor at the University of Laval. You can see there that the flags are at half-mast in honor of the lives that were lost during this horrific attack. John.
As we hear about those taken by death, we know that others are fighting for their lives in hospital. What update do we have, Arthi, on those injured in the attack?
Well, we know that at least 5 people did remain in hospital early today. 3 were expected to be released soon. Hospital officials saying that their conditions were improving, but 2 require more surgery, and were in required significant improvement and help to their conditions. They were in critical condition as well. Now, we did hear from hospital officials earlier today updating us on their injuries. Take a listen.
So there's 2 patients that have sustained significant injury into mainly the abdomen. They also have other injury on their arms, their legs, and so on. For now, as we say in surgery, bleeding has stopped. Okay, so the life is saved. However, there's significant care that needs to be done in the following days and weeks. Other surgery are planned and will happen in the future for those patients.
So while all those victims are trying to recover and return to their families, we know of the 6 who were killed. A GoFundMe account has started to raise money for funerals for those individuals, and so far $55,000 has been raised, John.
Thanks, Arthi.
You're welcome.
Alexandra Bissonnette, the man suspected of carrying out the attack in Quebec City, is due to make a court appearance. We'll go live to Quebec City for the latest. That's next. Breaking news we're following from Quebec City. The suspect in the shooting rampage at the mosque last night has been identified as 27-year-old Alexandra Bissonnette. Bissonnette was a student at Laval University and is expected to appear in court this afternoon. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen others wounded when a gunman opened fire during evening prayers. For the very latest, let's turn to the CBC's Catherine Cullen. She's in Quebec City and joins us now by phone. Catherine, we're watching for the suspect's court appearance. What can you tell us about that?
Well, and we're also, John, waiting for more information from officials in Quebec City, the police, as well as the prosecutor's office, to find out a little bit more about what sort of charges we might be expecting him to face. As you say, we have confirmed that his name is Alexandre Bissonnette, that he's a student at Université Laval. Obviously, the big question that is coming from everywhere today, from the Prime Minister to the Premier to Muslim leaders to the people that you talk to outside of this mosque, is how could anyone do this? What might motivate someone to do this? So that will certainly be part of the conversation today when the suspect does indeed make his court appearance, which, as you say, is something we continue to wait for.
And those answers may be a long time coming, but we are learning more about those killed. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, let's talk about the identity of 3 of the victims. And I will add as well that members of the Muslim community, Muslim leaders in Quebec City who spoke out earlier today, talked about what they felt was the importance of talking about these people's stories, allowing Quebecers and Canadians to understand a little bit about the lives of the people who were killed in this shooting. Let's talk about Boubacar Tabti, a Tunisian of origin. He's lived in Quebec since 2011, has 2 children, a 3-year-old and an 11-year-old. Khaled Belkacemi, a professor at Université Laval, who was an agri-food and soil engineer. Azzedine Soufiane, the owner of a halal butcher shop and grocery store that is less than a kilometer from the mosque. We passed by it when we came to the mosque today. He's also a father, a well-known member of the community here. A lot of people talking about him reaching out to them when they, for instance, first arrived in Canada. So somebody who's very well-known, seems to be very well-loved. Those are just 3 of the lives, 3 of the 6 lives that were taken yesterday. And, of course, there are still several people in critical condition.
Catherine, thanks for all your work on this story today. CBC's Catherine Cullen in Quebec City. Stay with CBC News Network. We're back with the latest in just a moment.
An attack against a place of worship, against people praying in a mosque, is an attack on these very freedoms. It negates the principles on which Canada was founded.
That's interim Conservative leader Rona Ambrose talking about the Quebec City mosque shooting. Prime Minister Trudeau and the other party leaders stood in the House earlier today to express their sadness and offer their condolences. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded, 2 of them critically. Police have a suspect in custody. My next guest was going to prayers last night at the Islamic Cultural Centre in Quebec City, but he was running late. And when he arrived, the mosque had become a crime scene. Ali Asafiri joins me now by phone from Quebec City. Thank you for joining us, sir. You were supposed to go to the mosque. When you were rushing to get there, what did you see?
Actually, the news gets so fast by people who was in the mosque and outside of the mosque. So on my way there, I saw that all the police were everywhere. Actually, at least 10 cars of police and a huge perimeter of security was already set actually in the beginning. So of course, in the first thing is to realize something is happening. Everybody is shocked, and a lot of people came to see if their parents were injured or victims of this terrorist act.
So how did it make you feel at that moment?
Of course, in the beginning, you're not realizing everything, and you're shocked, but also scared about what happened, who's injured inside, and you will worry, of course, about how Muslim people will react, after this event, and how people will take it too. People now have, some children now don't have any father anymore, and it is actually hard to leave those moments, especially that we don't have a lot of information in the beginning. A lot of rumors went, 15 people who died, and after that, 4, 6, 2, so we don't have any, official information. We don't have names, so everybody was, actually worrying about their family, their parents, their friends.
Do you have friends who were there? Do you have friends who were injured or wounded?
Till now, we have 6 people who was a victim of this act, and in the beginning, we didn't have news. So we start to call each other, every people who know someone who used to go to the mosque, we will call him. And recently, what we saw is a lot of people we knew, and they was confirmed that they died. So yeah, a lot of people I knew, 5 out of 6 people, I know them personally, and I'm actually sad, and I don't know what to say other than I hope their family is okay, and of course they're sad, but we need to be strong, and we need as Canadian and Quebec society to be all together for passing those moments all together, actually.
So how are you feeling now in terms of being able to go and pray? I guess the next call to prayer is in about an hour or so from now. Will you go to a mosque? Will you pray? How do you feel?
Yeah, of course I will go to any mosque. The security of the police is everywhere right now. But even if the security wasn't that up and that high, I will go to. Actually, we need to be strong, and our strongest is to be together, not afraid from anybody. And actually, this is what we need to focus on. And it's not if there is a maniac or someone like this terrorist who did that, all people will do it,
I think Canadians are struggling, Muslim and non-Muslim, to understand this and to wonder how best to move forward. Someone who was there last night, what would your advice be?
Let me just say that in the beginning they say there's 2 suspects who did that, and even the news, the media say there is a Moroccan too who did it. And I knew him personally, Mohammed Belkader. And this man is a gentleman, and he's so kind and everything. So we didn't believe it in the beginning. We were shocked more than anything. And after almost 10 hours, the police released him by saying that it was a mistake. He was only a witness. So actually, even him, his family in Morocco, and his friend in Quebec, we was worried about him. And till now, the last hours, we knew about him, he's safe, and he wasn't actually a suspect.
Ali, I want to thank you for your time on this. Ali Asafiri attends the mosque that was targeted in last night's attack, and he joined us from Quebec City. Donald Trump spoke to Justin Trudeau today about the mosque attack. The U.S. president offered the Prime Minister his condolences and made an offer to help. Here's White House Secretary Sean Spicer.
The president got off the phone just a short time ago with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau to discuss the vicious attack on a Quebec City mosque last night. The president offered his condolences as well as his thoughts and prayers to the victims and their family and to all Canadians. This is another senseless act of violence that cannot be tolerated. The President also pledged to support the Canadian Police and Intelligence Service in any way necessary. Prime Minister Trudeau was extremely appreciative, and he was also cautious to draw conclusions on the motives at this stage of the investigation, and the President shared those thoughts.
Meanwhile, after a weekend of protests, chaos at airports, and global criticism, the White House was busy defending Donald Trump's sweeping travel ban today. His executive order singles out travelers from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. The CBC's Paul Hunter has more from Washington.
Welcome to your 9th day!
The day after, demonstrators across the U.S. made clear their fury for Donald Trump's new rules on refugees and immigration.
No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here.
The president himself weighed in.
We're moving things along, and we're moving them along fast. We actually had a very good day yesterday in terms of Homeland Security.
By Twitter, adding, "There's nothing nice about searching for terrorists before they can enter our country," he tweeted. "This was a big part of my campaign. Study the world." Indeed, Trump did campaign on such action and won the White House in no small part because of it. But critics insist blocking entry to America for refugees and immigrants from certain, mostly Muslim countries sends an ugly message to the world.
I don't think this ban will make us any safer. I frankly think it'll be a propaganda bonanza for ISIS.
And today, for the first time since leaving office, former President Barack Obama also weighed in, applauding the weekend protests, and in a statement said he fundamentally disagrees with the notion of discriminating against individuals because of their faith or religion. The White House insists there is no faith-based discrimination here. All the affected countries have links to terrorism. As for those caught up in the new rules this weekend, an inconvenience, says the White House, in the name of U.S. security. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
And here on CBC News Network, we continue to follow the deadly shooting at a mosque in Quebec City. 6 people were killed as they prayed last night. Quebec police now say they have 1 suspect in custody in connection with the attack. Earlier today, Quebec political leaders and members of the Muslim community held a news conference. It wrapped up with a prayer of unity.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين
A tragedy took place in our capital, our beautiful capital, so welcoming and peaceful. The whole world is watching us. Together, it is time to show who we are.
Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard calling last night's rampage at a mosque an attack on all Quebec. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen others wounded when shots rang out during evening prayer. Alexandra Bissonnette has been named as the suspect. We're also learning more about the victims. One owned a halal butcher shop, another was a professor at Laval University, and a third arrived in Quebec almost 6 years ago from Tunisia. For more reaction in the community, let's turn to Stephen Burke. Now, Stephen is the chairman of the Central Quebec School Board. His strong connections to the community in Quebec City, where the mosque is located, and he joins us now. Mr. Burke, thanks for joining us. You've lived there for some 30 years. When you heard this attack had happened, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I'm born and raised in Quebec City. It's been the home of my parents, my grandparents, and since the early 1800s. It was unimaginable that something like this would happen in our beautiful city. It is not indicative of our city at all. So today is a day of mourning, and we send out our thoughts are with and prayers are with the families of the victims, because it's a terrible thing. So immediately when I found out about it last night, I could hardly believe it, because it's not something that you would expect in Quebec City, for that matter, not even in Canada, because we're a very peaceful nation. But it was very sad, very sad.
You're an educator. You have young people under your care. Some of those young people may be without fathers now. A handful of teenagers, we understand, in the school board have been impacted by the shooting. How are they doing?
Well, they're doing fine under the circumstances. We've tried not to put any sort of focus on them other than we're there to help. What I do know is that they were happy to be back at school this morning. The principals are doing a fine job in making sure that these students are getting the services that they require for the present time. We have professionals on staff. We have actually the partners with the Jeffrey Hill and St. Bridget's team, which is a team of medical and psychological staff. And so everyone's on hand, but we're trying to make things simple so that these young men and women aren't under too much pressure. But what I've been told is they are happy to be back in let's call it a regular life atmosphere from what they've gone through last night. Very different. So we're there to help, and we will, but we've got the perfect staff to do that.
Just so we're clear, I would imagine that those who have directly lost a parent would not be in school, but we're talking about others in the community who may have known or may be related to the victims in this case?
I think you're right, but I can't, you see, I do not know. I do know that we have children, students in our schools that have been directly or indirectly involved. Actually, some of them were in the mosque yesterday evening. Okay, they were there last night. And today they've gone to school. Now, they must know, as you heard previously, this is a very tightly knit community. And of course, everyone knows each other. But I'm assuming that they've decided to go to school, but I don't know more than that.
Well, that's incredible courage even in that act. As an educator, what are the tools that are available to you to help cope with some of the questions that not only these students may have, but other students in the school might have about a crime that seems to have no sense to it?
Well, you're quite right. It's a crime that has no sense. Each of first of all, our parents or the tutors of our students, all of them have received a note from our Director General, in which, of course, we mourn what has happened. We have our thoughts, and again, our prayers are for the victims and their families. We are also stating that if need be, we will be able to supply support. We're not pressuring. We're not going to make something out of it in our schools unless we have to. Okay, sometimes it's better to let things be than to start discussing issues if it's not if it's not something that really comes from the base and that kids really need for us to discuss it. But if they need to discuss it, we have social workers, we have psychologists, we have we have a professional staff, as I mentioned, we have a hospital that can provide services, and again, we're very, very sensitive to the reaction of the students. But we do this for the students. This is not something that we're not going to do anything that we feel is not necessary.
There has been a lot of talk recently of Islamophobia and wondering what the community can do, the larger community, presumably the education system as well. Is there a strategy or a philosophy that you have going ahead to try to deal with issues such as this?
Well, in our schools, all students are equal. In fact, the English system has always even had integrated the special needs students in our classes. So we've always had in our English system, everyone is important, everyone's in the class, and everyone gets along with each other. And I'm anxious to see what the investigation on what happened last night will discover, because I think that it's a very unique incident, and it has nothing to do with how our students view each other and how they get along.
Stephen Burke, this must be a difficult time for you going forward. I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us here today.
Thank you very much. And again, our thoughts and prayers to the families of the victims. And it is a very sad day for Quebec City and Canada.
Absolutely. Stephen Burke in Quebec City. He is the chairman of the Central Quebec School Board. Communities across Quebec and the country are reacting to news of the attack. CBC's Sean Henry is in Montreal, and he has more on what Muslim leaders there are saying.
They're shocked but not surprised. All day long, they've been telling one story after another about when their mosque was attacked or when they themselves received threats. We've heard stories like anti-Islamic stickers on mosques, windows broken. One Muslim leader in this community said someone actually shot through his window, and they say no amount of security or precaution seems to be stopping this behavior. You might remember about three and a half years ago, there was a debate in this province about whether civil servants should be wearing religious headwear. And some Muslim leaders say the tone, the nasty tone of that debate lingers today, but never did they expect a shooting like what happened yesterday in Quebec City.
The school board officials in Quebec City, they held a news conference earlier. This obviously a huge concern for them. What did they say?
Yeah, educators struggling to figure out the right words to say to these students. At one school board in particular, many students there have relatives who were victims. And a school board official said that these kids are essentially caught up in what's an adult problem, because otherwise they play with other students, they get along well with other students, and now they're left confused. So they will be provided with counseling, as will other students. And everybody's really just trying to make sense of what happened yesterday.
The CBC's Sean Henry in Montreal. And a quick update for you now. Quebec police are expected to hold a news conference at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to provide an update on the attack. CBC News Network will bring you that news conference live. We continue to track the latest on the breaking news from Quebec. You're watching CBC News Network. Breaking news we're following from Quebec City. The suspect in the shooting rampage at a mosque last night has been identified as 27-year-old Alexandra Bissonnette. Bissonnette was a student at Laval University and is expected to appear in court this afternoon. 6 people were killed and more than a dozen others wounded when a gunman opened fire during evening prayers.
To our Muslim brothers and sisters, we mourn with you, we pray with you, and we promise that we will stand united and fight against the forces of hatred, bigotry, and Islamophobia.
That was NDP leader Tom Mulcair speaking earlier today in the House of Commons about the deadly shooting attack. He went on to say that Canadians don't feel safe in their place of worship. He stressed that's unacceptable and is, quote, not the Canada we believe in. Many Canadian mosques are stepping up security following the shooting in Quebec City. Yousuf Badat is with the Canadian Council of Imams in Toronto. He spoke to us earlier about his reaction to the attack.
There are definitely certain events that occur within the framework of various mosques and Islamic institutions. Sometimes some of them are considered minor and they're not reported. But recently, many of the imams and the mosque leadership, they have made a decision, and they're making the general public from the Muslim congregants aware that if any incident, regardless of being small, minor, or big, it must be reported so that the stats are there and the information is there so that we can deal with the issues, whether it's a hate crime or whether it's Islamophobia or extremism, whatever the case may be.
A mosque is, of course, a place of worship. It's a sanctuary. It's a place where you go to feel safe, to commune with your God. What are you telling members of your mosque and others across the country who might be feeling a little scared right now?
Well, basically trying to comfort them that generally Canada is a great place to be. And, you know, we shouldn't feel that this type of tragedy will spill over. But at the same time, we need to take our precautions. So, for example, at our mosque here, what we've done is we've hired a security company, and they'll be full-time looking after the premises. We're also, you know, informing our staff that they need to be a little extra vigilant and, you know, make sure the gates are locked and the doors are locked once you're in the facility. We're also comforting our youth and the children who come for classes here that, you know, if there is any concern or anything on your mind, then let's talk, let's get the necessary help. The local police agency, the Toronto Police here, have you know, visit us for some of the prayers, and they're constantly outside, you know, taking care in case something is happening. So we're getting a lot of support, and we're also working hand in hand with others, whether it be our own community or from the broader community or the agencies.
That was Yousuf Badat with the Canadian Council of Imams in Toronto. You're watching CBC News Network. I'm John Northcott. A quick recap for you on the situation in Quebec City. The suspect in the shooting rampage at a mosque last night has been identified as 27-year-old Alexandra Bissonnette. Bissonnette was a student at Laval University and is expected in court shortly. This is Ottawa as we head to the top of the hour. Coming up on Power and Politics, conversation with the Minister of Public Safety about that attack at the Quebec City Mosque. Plus, Quebec Police are expected to provide a live update at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it right here on CBC News Network. Rosemary Barton is next.
I'm Rosemary Barton. Today on Power and Politics.
We will get to the bottom of this. Such senseless violence has no place in Canadian society.
Attack in Quebec. The Prime Minister, other party leaders are in Quebec City for a vigil for the 6 people killed at a mosque last night. 1 man has been arrested. An update from the RCMP and the police is coming at 5:30 Eastern.